In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Welcome, friends, to the 74th episode of Crime and Punishment, a legal podcast, not a political one. The official podcast of the Invictus Law Firm, PA, a criminal defense law firm in Orlando, Florida, the website for which is augustusinvictus.com, and that is me, yours truly, the host of this program. Today, I want to be very clear. I do not want anybody in the comments talking about politics. This show has nothing to do with politics. If you've been a member of this audience for any period of time, you know that I love Big Brother. I support whoever is in power at the time of this broadcast that you're listening to. If you're listening to it 5 years from now, I'm totally in favor of whoever's in power at that time. I have no political opinions. None of us here do. We all learned our lesson. We don't say anything political. This is 100% entirely legal commentary. And we will not tolerate any political speech. This is on YouTube, after all. So I hope that none of our audience members will say anything denigrating the powers that be, or say anything political at all. Because this is only about the law. With that being said, we do discuss political prosecutions. Though we don't discuss politics, it's very clear when someone is on a political witch hunt. There's supposed to be a great divide between a legal prosecution and a political prosecution. So that we do discuss on this program. And we're going to discuss that today. You might have noticed a watershed moment in American history when former President Trump was indicted on criminal charges. Never happened before in American history. And what I like to point out to people is that that's just American history, the American Republic. The republic on which this country was founded on, the Roman Republic. No one really knows much about that. You hear all about the evil Caesars that came into power, especially Julius Caesar. What a horrible person. Augustus Caesar. God, terrible. You see Hollywood films about, I'd rather have a corrupt republic than a tyranny under you, Crassus, right? No one knows much about the republic that preceded the Caesars, but corruption was its hallmark. The republic was essentially gangs, family gangs, warring with each other all the time. And any time a new general would come into the position of power, he would become consul. He would wipe out all of his enemies. All of their property would escheat to the state. One of the famous episodes in the life of Julius Caesar was when a dictator came in and ordered Julius Caesar to divorce his wife because she was part of one of those persona non grata families. And Caesar refused and ran with his wife, literally just ran to the hills with her and hid from the dictator. These were called proscriptions. The incoming power would wipe out his enemies. Right? And this would go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth for centuries. Until the Caesars, of course. And then just if you were an enemy of the Caesars, you were an enemy of the state. You were, you're out. We have entered now the phase in the American Republic, that phase of proscriptions. The people in power now wipe out their enemies when they come to power. Right? That is the significance of the Trump indictment. What's amazing is all these conservatives who see the Trump indictment and think, this is the first political prosecution in American history. It is true, this is unprecedented. However, it is clearly not the first political prosecution in American history. What's amazing about their surprise is that they seem to have missed the James Fields trial. They missed the Rise Above movement trials in Charlottesville and in Los Angeles. They just completely missed the trials of those guys in Charlottesville, Goodwin and company. They missed all of these things. Amazingly, because what a day, what a 48 hours it's been, right? Since this was all announced. Even Mike Cernovich has finally caught on. Something is very wrong here. When J6 happened, I don't know, did Matt Walsh miss J6? He couldn't have. To think that the Trump indictment is somehow the first political prosecution in history, all of these conservatives have watched this unfold since January 6th, right? Couldn't fail to miss these things. I don't know, but Mike Cernovich has now published something about this. He caught on to it. Matt Walsh is turning around on this. I mean, conservatives are really coming to understand Charlottesville was the prototype for J6. You create this alternate reality of what actually happened at the event, and you dragnet prosecute everybody you can get your hands on. Well, the federal government has those kinds of resources. It was the federal government that prosecuted the Rise Above movement in Charlottesville and Los Angeles. It was the federal government who pushed for the prosecution of James Fields while he was on trial for murder at the state level. It's the federal government of the United States that instituted the largest dragnet in world history, looking for all the people that were present on January 6th at the Capitol. How the Albemarle County Podunk District Attorney thinks that he has the manpower to do the same thing the feds did, sending secret fugitive warrants all across the country to pick up everybody that was at a torchlit rally. Oh, but you might not have heard this news yet, dear listeners. So that's what we're here for today. We're here to talk about this new escapade in this reign of terror. And not just in Charlottesville, but all across the country, right? I think we all know, those of you listening to this program, we all know that Charlottesville was the watershed moment. And J6 was just where everybody finally woke up to, oh my God, something terrible has happened in this country. But clearly Charlottesville was the initiation of it. And all of the things that came after it. Blacklisting normal citizens from Airbnb, Chase Manhattan, Stripe, Merchant Services, PayPal. Not to mention social media, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, so on and so forth, which is how we are on YouTube, because we don't talk about politics. We only talk about legal commentary. But all of these were legal cases. And it was finally January 6th that conservatives started waking up to the fact that all you have to do to prosecute a case effectually is accuse the defendant of being a white nationalist. If we can say that this episode at the Capitol on January 6th was a white nationalist uprising, no one's going to come to their aid. It's over for them, because that's exactly what happened at Charlottesville. Certainly you had white nationalists there, you had actual Nazis there, but it was at the statue of Robert E. Lee for a reason. And the ACLU got the rally moved back to that statue after the city council had moved it for a reason. And the judge agreed with the ACLU and the Unite the Right demonstrators for a reason, and that reason is the freedom of speech. It had nothing to do with white nationalism, though obviously it did for many people there. It had to do with uniting the right, hence the name of the rally for most of the people there. It had to do with Southern heritage for a lot of people there. It had to do with just preserving history, because they were protesting the taking down of the monument. There were a lot of groups there for a lot of various reasons, but all you have to do is say these people were Nazis and they have no more rights. Do whatever you want to them. All that being said, let's get to the heart of this. I'm going to show you, first of all, the mainstream media and what they know about this and what they're saying about this. I'm not going to show you the article I read first because I want you to see what a contrast there is between these two stories, right? It's night and day. Details on one person indicted for burning torches at Torch March released. CBS 19 News. Whoever wrote that headline should be fired. That is the worst headline I've perhaps ever seen. They're saying, right, somebody was indicted for burning a tiki torch at the Torchlit rally on August 11th, 2017. And they're saying these are the details on that person. That's what that headline means. Now, let's see if I can play this so that you can hear it. This is the news story from CBS 19 News.
Some alleged participants of the Tiki Torch rally on grounds back in 2017 now being charged with felonies almost 6 years later.
That's because there are no statute of limitations here in Virginia. Now, our CBS 19's Felicity Taylor has all the details. Felicity.
Dan and Alexia, an Albemarle County grand jury indicting multiple people for allegedly burning an object with the intent to intimidate. Like you said, the offense date is August 11th, 2017, the Torch rally the night before the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. The indictments related to the people carrying tiki torches during the Friday night rally. The felony carries a sentence of up to 5 years. But here's where it gets complicated. There are several indictments, but so far only one is complete. That's the case of Will Zachary Smith of Texas. He's been indicted on the burning charge, and court records say he was a fugitive since June of 2018 when he was indicted for maliciously releasing gas at the rally on the 12th. Smith is currently being held at the Albemarle Charlottesville Regional Jail, and he'll appear at the Albemarle Circuit Court for a bond hearing for both of those on Thursday. Now, it's not clear who the other indicted individuals are or how many there are. The Albemarle County Commonwealth's attorney says it's all part of an ongoing investigation. We'll keep you updated as more arrests are made. In the studio, Felicity Taylor, CBS 19 News.
All right, so that's it. That's all there is. Somebody was arrested. He's being extradited from Texas. The prosecutor there got several indictments. We don't know how many there are. We don't know who it is. It says in the written article, quote, "It's not clear who the other indicted individuals are or how many there are," end quote. Now, if you were a Soviet counsel, how would you do it? You do the same exact thing. You would arrest a test case, you would publicize it, make sure everybody knows about it, and then you'd say, yeah, well, we're arresting several. Actually, we already have several indictments. We don't want to tell you who they are or where they are. We want the entire country to know that the hammer could drop anywhere at any time. So watch yourselves. Put the entire country in a state of terror. This is literal state-sponsored terror from where I'm sitting. Now, I will say, I have lawyers, right? I have friends. I'm in the legal profession. I know a lot of people. I happen to know for a fact there is no warrant for me. I was there at the Torchlit rally. And yet, I had to spend all night wondering, am I going to get ambushed when I wake up in the morning? Am I going to get ambushed on the way to Mass? Am I going to get ambushed when I'm with my sons? Am I going to get ambushed on the way to the office? Now I know, I have confirmed there is no warrant for me, but not everybody has the ability to see things like that. These are secret, out-of-state fugitive warrants. So everybody who was at that Tiki Torch rally now has to live in fear for an indeterminate period of time while this quote-unquote ongoing investigation plays out. This is deliberate instillment of fear. This is actual terrorism by the new district attorney of Albemarle County, or county attorney, whatever they call them up there. So that's what the mainstream media knows. Basically, nothing. They've arrested this guy. They're extraditing him from Texas. Shoot, I know more about this case than the media does, because I went to the county clerk's website, or the Albemarle County record search, and found the guy's case. So I know more about this than the mainstream media does. Now I'm going to read you a different article. The article that was originally sent to me yesterday. And I want you to think about how different this is. About the level of intel given to the mainstream media by the press release of the Albemarle County prosecutor versus the level of intel that the Antifa, Molly Conger, has. Never done this before, because they don't deserve the time of day. Never in my life have I read an Antifa article online before on one of these programs. Today we're going to break that rule because it is so important to show you the level of corruption in this reign of terror going on all across the country. You might recall that when I was kicked out of Canada, or quote-unquote allowed to leave, because the Canadians are so polite, Canadian Border Patrol cited in their report, because we had somebody friendly in Canadian Border Patrol who told us about the report, who read it personally and reported to us on it. These people had cited the Vancouver Antifa website for their justification in sending me back to the United States. So there had always been this rumor among the right wing that the government works with Antifa, police work with Antifa, the FBI works with Antifa. It was always a rumor. I was a criminal defense attorney. Until you prove it to me, I don't believe anything. But when we knew about that report saying what it did, and that the Canadian Border Patrol depended on the Antifa's intel, that really sealed it for me. And that was how many years ago now? And we've seen explicit collaboration between the FBI and Antifa, between local law enforcement and Antifa, between every level of government and the Antifa. So today, I want you to realize the difference between what the mainstream media knows about this case and what Molly Conger knows about this case. These articles are night and day difference. Molly's article starts like this. There is no statute of limitations on felonies in Virginia. With that in mind, here is section 18.2-423.01-B of the Code of Virginia. Burning object on property of another or a highway or other public place with intent to intimidate. Penalty. A. Any person who, with the intent of intimidating any person or group of persons, burns an object on the private property of another without permission is guilty of a Class 6 felony. B. Any person who, with the intent of intimidating any person or group of persons, burns an object on a highway or other place in a manner having a direct tendency to place another person in reasonable fear or apprehension of death or bodily injury is guilty of a Class 6 felony. Now, I should probably give you the disclaimer here. Probably should have given this disclaimer at the beginning of the program. I am not an attorney in the state, or Commonwealth rather, of Virginia. I'm not licensed to practice law in Virginia. I'm a Florida attorney, so I'm not giving anyone here legal advice in Virginia or on Virginia law. Don't believe a word I say about Virginia law. Call a lawyer in Virginia, right? Especially if you are concerned that you are in this witch hunt right now, that you are a subject of this witch hunt, and that your local SWAT team might be coming for you, and that you might be extradited to Virginia for this. Don't believe me. Call a lawyer in Virginia. So let me just give that disclaimer right off the bat. So this is Molly Conger. giving you the statute from the Code of Virginia, right? A Class 6 felony. That means basically what here in Florida is a third-degree felony, where you have a maximum of 5 years, minimum of 1 year prison, maximum of 5 years prison. That doesn't really mean a minimum of 1 year prison. I mean, you could get a fine, you could get probation for a year, I mean, whatever. The hard line is it can't be more than 5 years in prison. And, I mean, it's questionable whether you're going to get that if you don't have a record, or, you know, given the circumstances where some people just happen to be there. It's doubtful that most people would get 5 years, but again, I'm not a Virginia attorney, so I don't know. I'm just telling you this is the statute as quoted by Molly Conger in her article, which continues thusly. On August 11th, 2017, hundreds of torch-bearing marchers traversed the grounds of the University of Virginia. They'd come to Charlottesville from across the country, taking Friday morning flights or taking turns at the wheel for cross-country drives in rented vans with guys they met on message boards, arriving early before the big event the following morning. They gathered at Nameless Field, a grassy acre near the UVA tennis courts with a deceptive name, and distributed tiki torches. Men with walkie-talkies clipped to their belts, some with wired earpieces, barked orders. Elliot Klein, an ambitious young white nationalist organizer calling himself Eli Mosley after 20th century British fascist Oswald Mosley, shouted at the crowd as they formed into a line. "We're picking big guys, no females." Klein and his security team would be selecting the biggest marchers to lay down their torches and keep the perimeter as the march moved through the university grounds. They might need their hands free. Ooh, what an ominous concluding sentence to that paragraph. The march wound its way through grounds, up the lawn, then up the steps of the University of Virginia's iconic rotunda. On the other side of the rotunda, gathered near the statue of Thomas Jefferson, a small group of anti-racist activists waited. In her testimony during a later civil trial, one of the women who was terrorized that night said, "When we heard the roaring of the approaching crowd, we just linked armed and held hands and started to sing." She said at first it sounded like thunder, like the earth was growling. Not indicative of mental illness at all. As they grew closer, but before she could see the light of the torches, she began to make out the chants. Hundreds of voices raised in unison, shouting blood and soil. Testifying about that night 4 years later, she said she still heard it in her nightmares. And by the time the small group of mostly students realized the magnitude and ferocity of the approaching mob, it was too late. They were surrounded at the base of the statue by hundreds of torch-wielding white supremacists. For just a few minutes that those trapped at the base of the statue said they believed might be their last, as they were doused in lighter fluid, maced and punched, there was a melee. The police made no move to intervene as streams of pepper spray were let loose and screams of "Medic!" were audible above the roar of "You will not replace us." When the trapped counter-protesters were finally able to flee, stumbling blindly with burning eyes and covering their heads in a hailstorm of fists and torches, the marchers declared victory. Richard Spencer, an organizer of that weekend's rally, climbed to the base of the statue and delivered a victory speech to the still roaring crowd, now shouting, "Hail victory! Hail Spencer!" As Spencer told them, "We occupy this ground. We won." The marchers dispersed to their various hotels, campgrounds, and Airbnbs. Spencer claims he booked his under the pseudonym Literally Hitler. They had to rest up for the real battle in the morning. While they slept, a young man from Ohio was driving through the night, perhaps already knowing his gray Dodge Challenger would be impounded as a murder weapon before he slept again. He checked Twitter and retweeted a post. David Duke had tweeted images of the Torch March, celebrating the alt-right's success that evening with the caption, "Our people on the march. Will you be at Unite the Right tomorrow?" Before he left Ohio that evening, his mother texted him, "Be careful." And James Alex Fields, in one of his last texts before a lifetime behind bars. A lifetime plus 419 years, Molly. Minor correction. Replied to his mother with a photograph of Adolf Hitler and the words, "We're not the ones who need to be careful." 5.5 years later, The word Charlottesville has become synonymous with those two fused images. Field's mangled Challenger and an iconic photo of the crowd, torches in hand, the rotunda at their backs. Fields was convicted, both in state and federal court, of Heather Heyer's murder and multiple counts of aggravated malicious wounding. Daniel Borden, Alex Ramos, Jacob Goodwin, and Tyler Watkins went away for a brutal gang beating of a young black man, who, by the way, is on camera beating other people with a maglite flashlight. Richard Preston, an imperial wizard in the Ku Klux Klan, did some time for discharging his firearm in the general direction of another black man after shouting, "Die," N-word. But all in all, for all the violence of both days, there was a curious reluctance to bring charges for anything that didn't rise to the level of attempted murder, like somebody holding a flamethrower to the right-wingers, right? There are thousands of photographs, video from every conceivable angle, taken by victims, bystanders, professional photojournalists, and even the marchers themselves. Their faces are uncovered. Their motives are clear. The law is fairly straightforward, because now they care about the law. But the University of Virginia lies within the jurisdiction of Albemarle County. In 2017, Albemarle County Commonwealth's attorney Robert Tracci chose not to bring any burning objects cases under Section 18.2-423. He didn't think you could make a case against the Tiki Torch mob. The Commonwealth's attorney for Charlottesville at the time, Dave Chapman, wrote in a memo in October of that year that he believed the cases could be made, but the UVA cases weren't his to prosecute. But in Virginia, prosecutors come and go, and a felony lives forever. In an October 2019 debate between then sitting prosecutor Tracci and his challenger Jim Hensley, Tracci again scoffed at the idea of indicting these cases, saying Hensley's belief that it was even possible was a sign he was inexperienced and wrong for the job. A month later, in November 2019, Hensley won the election. Now it seems he's trying to make good on his campaign promise of proving Robert Tracci wrong. So there's a lot of inside baseball here that we're going to just take a moment here. So what Molly is saying is that there was a dispute over jurisdiction. This happened on UVA grounds. That's Albemarle County Commonwealth's jurisdiction. Attorney Robert Tracci. People were asking Dave Chapman. Dave Chapman wrote a memo. Dave Chapman was the attorney for Charlottesville. And he's saying, not mine to prosecute. Can't do it. Only Tracci could do it. And Tracci's saying, we can't make this case. We're not going to do it. Jim Hensley comes along to run against Tracci for the position. So he's going to be head attorney. And part of his platform is, we're going to charge these people for marching with torches on UVA grounds. Tracci, the incumbent, says, that's insane, and this only proves that you are unfit for this job. You can't bring this case. It's just not prosecutable. And then Hensley wins the election. That was November 2019. So that's what? 20, 21, 22, 3.5 years later, he gets indictments. We're not to that point yet, but 3.5 years later, Molly Conger tells us Hensley is making good on his promise. In February 2023, the Albemarle County Commonwealth's Attorney's Office quietly sought and got indictments under the Burning Objects statute. A grand jury agreed with Hensley. There was probable cause to believe that objects had been burned with the intent to intimidate. Fugitive warrants were issued. Arrests were made by local police in far-ranging jurisdictions. Now, nearly 6 years after that hot night in August, the extraditions are starting. How does Molly Conger know that fugitive warrants were issued? How does Molly Conger know that arrests were made by local police in far-ranging jurisdictions? The mainstream media does not know that. How does she know that? How does she know that from these far-ranging jurisdictions, we're about to have people extradited to Charlottesville, or to Albemarle County, to be more accurate? How does she know this, and the mainstream media does not? It gets a lot more telling that she has information that no one else has. Now, whether her source is inside the Albemarle County Commonwealth's Attorney's Office or whether her source is in law enforcement, who knows? But I think it's pretty clear it's in the Albemarle County Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, right? If you go to Jim Hensley's Twitter, which I did, I tagged him in this post, you'll see that the vast majority of support for Jim Hensley is not in Charlottesville, Virginia. It's Antifa accounts from everywhere. The collusion that is apparent between the Antifa and Jim Hensley, and now the Albemarle County Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, is pretty bold-faced. Now, Conger's article is not getting as much attention as maybe CBS 19, but does it need to? She's talking to her audience. She knows her audience. Over the coming days and weeks, and here's where it gets really nefarious. Over the coming days and weeks, I'll share with you the stories of the men who carried torches that night. Some of them are now facing felony charges in Albemarle County. Others may come to share that fate. After the crowd dispersed that night, after the deadly rally the next morning, those men went home. Some started businesses. Some died. Some trafficked drugs, beat their wives, and choked their girlfriends. Went to grad school, went to prison, started families, ran for office, left the movement, tried to lead the movement, or just tried to disappear. There are as many stories as there were flames in the night, when their voices joined as one, shouting, "Jews will not replace us," then going their separate ways back to the communities they came from. And now some of them are on their way back here, this time against their will. So, the mainstream media has no idea who these people are. No idea who's been indicted. No idea how many people have been indicted, or will be indicted, or where they're from, or anything else. And yet, Molly Conger somehow knows that fugitive warrants were issued. She knows what for. She knows they're in far-ranging jurisdictions. She knows that some of them started businesses, some of them died, some of them trafficked drugs, beat their wives and choked their girlfriends, went to grad school, went to prison, started families, ran for office, left the movement, tried to leave the movement, or just tried to disappear. How does she know who's on this list? Unless somebody in the Albemarle County office is telling her. Now, all the stuff before, the narrative of the nameless field and Mosley and the chanting and all that altercation and all this stuff, yeah, okay. I mean, she's been covering this for a long time. Anybody who's been covering this event for that long would know these kind of details, but who would know the details of secret out-of-state fugitive warrants, except for someone who is being told what they are by someone in the Albemarle County prosecutor's office? That is the distinction that needs to be pointed out. Every level of government has worked with the Antifa to do these things. Just this past week, I think, we've had riots in Los Angeles, Chicago, I think DC was on there, not sure. Does it matter anymore? They're all across the country all the time. No one is doing a dragnet for the people in these riots, in these mobs that actually viciously attack people, right? You've got somebody on here, you know what, let's do that. Let's do the Twitter feed. That's fun. If you type in Charlottesville to Twitter, all of Twitter's on fire right now about this. So somebody, Mystery Grove Publishing Company, they posted a screenshot retweeting Scott Greer. And the screenshot is CBS 19 News saying, and this is like less than a month ago. The headline is more homicides this year than in the past 6 years. That is in Charlottesville. Because it's the same channel, right? The same channel that we were playing the news story from at the beginning of this program. More homicides this year in Charlottesville than in the past 6 years. And yet, what they want to prosecute is people holding torches 6 years ago. That's what they're going to spend all their time and money and resources on. Here's another amazing thing to point out. Let me open this. This is on my phone. I was looking into this because this involves the state attorney here in Orlando, which, if you've listened to this program for any length of time, I have nothing but nice things to say, ironically, about the state attorney here in Orlando. It makes me look like a genius to my clients. Fair and just prosecution. It's like this think tank or organization, right? By all these like Soros-backed attorneys, state attorneys, that is, district attorneys, prosecutors, right? So all these guys, they get together and they want to end all this tough on crime policy, right? So conservatives are in an uproar all over the country because all these quote unquote Soros-backed prosecutors or Soros-appointed DAs, they're all soft on crime and murder rates are rising, which, is kind of true. But that's what they're about, is ending these draconian policies, which they're kind of right about in a lot of cases. Like, when police are out of control and they entrap people and they run up prison sentences of 40 years for some kid. I see it too much. So like I said, I have nothing but nice things to say about Monique Worrell, who has changed things here in Orlando, and I think for the better. However, Miss Worrell is on this amicus brief that Hingley is on. Right? They're both part of this fair and just prosecution team, right? So if you go to Hingley's Twitter, you can see this, and it's like double speak extraordinaire. Hold on a second. I thought I had it up. Let me look at my own. Here we go. Hingley, Jim. I'm honored, says Jim. I'm honored to stand with a new wave of fair and just prosecutors making criminal legal system reform a reality from Maine to California, Minnesota to South Texas, and here in Virginia. And this is a retweet of Fair and Just Prosecution. It's a group photo. It says, thank you to all the 21st century prosecutors in the FJP network and experts in the field who were able to join us this week. We look forward to seeing how all of our discussions contribute to building a fairer, more equitable justice system nationwide. I say that in that tone of voice, not to mock what they are doing, because honestly, I'm pretty on board with that. The justice system is screwed. I say it all the time on this program. You've heard me say it a million times. The legal system, there are serious problems. Correction system, the prison system, serious problems that need to be fixed. And conservatives, quite frankly, they are part of the problem. They want to be tough on crime, and they have no idea the problem's already in the system that they're just exacerbating. So I'm all for justice reform. I'm all for criminal justice reform, 100%. What I'm not for is this total, blatant, brazen hypocrisy of saying that you're for criminal justice reform and you want to make things better for people and end these draconian sentences for drug use or whatever it is. And then you completely flip the table and you prosecute some obscure statute for something clearly not criminal and do a nationwide, or attempt rather, a nationwide dragnet to drag innocent men across the country back to Charlottesville for your political showcase. That I am not on board with. And that is what is happening right now. So they can tell you till they're blue in the face that they're for equality and justice and ending draconian laws and all that. It's all a lie. they're all for draconian laws against their political enemies. And that is the amazing thing, to see all these conservatives, the lights coming on. Oh, is this what's happening? Is this what's been happening the last 6 years now to this country? Oh, and now it's finally come on us. Now we're all Nazis. We're all white supremacists. Amazing. I was talking with a friend earlier today in the course of finding out, do I have a warrant out for my arrest for this political showcase? I was talking with a friend about this episode where Jocko was talking. He reads books a lot on his program. He was reading Solzhenitsyn and talking about how the Soviet Union changed to what it became, right? And it was a legal proceeding. The whole thing happened 100% legally. All they did was they changed the law, incrementally giving people progress, because that's what people want. So in the beginning, it was, if you hit somebody, it's a battery. Plain and simple. That's what it is. That's what it is in every country, right? You hit someone in the face, you punch someone, it's a battery. However, if you hit somebody who's a member of the party, now it's terrorism. Legal change. They changed the law. They passed the law. It's a legal thing. It's not like it's some arbitrary whim where some mob gets together and just wipes out civilization. Like, this happened all very legally. And it's now happened here. Let me go to the comments here. If there are any, who knows? I really gotta get better at interacting with the audience. John Gordon Mead, greetings, brother. Richard, greetings from Orlando. Hey, I'm in Orlando. Samaria, yes. God bless the judicial system. Let's see, greetings from the Philippines. How about that? Well, welcome to America, amigo. MW, I always think your name is a profanity, so I never read the whole thing, but good to see you here. Thanks for catching it live. Glad you could be here. Rolo Klevich, the 1944 Great Sedition trial eventually, after many months, got laughed out of court, and then after the judge died of a heart attack. So there are a lot of things where history is going to judge these people, right? You think of Waco. And the guy who was in charge of that killed himself when he found out the extent of what had happened and what had gone wrong. Now we look back on Waco and we're like, what in God's name were you thinking? Right? So, 500 years from now, people will look back on this period in American history and they'll think, my God, how could these Americans have allowed this government to do these things? Why didn't they rise up? Why didn't they stop them? Yeah, because we've said the same thing about the Romans, right? We've said the same thing about so many other societies. I remember when I was in high school and my Latin teacher would tell us about bread and circuses. Well, that's all you got to do to satisfy these Romans and keep them from rebelling against the Caesars. You give them Colosseum games and you make sure that they're well fed and they'll never revolt. Stupid Romans. What fools. Didn't they know what was being done? Didn't they know the bread and circuses game that the Caesars were playing so that they wouldn't revolt? It's hilarious, like looking back on it 20 years later, because I'm going to be 40 in July. 20 years later, looking back on it and thinking, man, that is so funny. Because these same people are all watching Netflix, going golfing this weekend. Tonight they're probably going to Bahama Breeze with their friends. No idea that bread and circuses is a live and present tactic to keep people from outrage. Now, think of it just practically. You have known for years. that the FBI and DOJ were sending out these warrants all over the country, ambushing people, dragging them into court for just being present on January 6th. Everybody's charged with the crime. You know that. But you weren't there on January 6th. You were so smart, you didn't go to the Capitol. You knew better. These people, sucks to be them, man, but what are you going to do? They're not coming to your door. That's all our attitude, right? So right now, Charlottesville, well, I wasn't in Charlottesville, you're thinking. These poor guys, I feel bad for them, but what am I supposed to do, you know? And the cops, shame on you. Shame on you. You should all be thinking this to yourself. Because they always say on these fugitive task forces, look, man, I don't know anything about it. I'm just here to, they just told me you were here and they told me to pick you up and this is my job. What do you want me to do? All of the cops that are going to be arresting these people on this political trial, they're all going to be like, well, I didn't know, man. It's a fugitive warrant. That's my job. I picked you up. You're going to Albemarle County. I have nothing to do with that. Don't blame me. None of those cops are thinking, if I do this, what kind of precedence does it set? And when these people finally take over in our jurisdiction, what's going to happen to me and to all of my quote-unquote white supremacist friends on the police force? Nobody thinks that far ahead. Everybody's very self-interested. Rationally so. Rationally so. I mean, what are you going to do on something at such a grand scale as America? Anyway, Great Sedition trial eventually got laughed out of court, he says. So, history will judge this moment. And they're going to judge all of us for doing nothing. Which is why I'm doing this podcast today. I looked into it. Like I said, no warrant for me. And to me, the people around me are advising me, just keep your head down. You have nothing to do with it. They're not after you. Don't say anything about it. Don't pick a fight with the prosecutor. Don't say anything. No one's coming after you. You had nothing to do with any of this. And I'm like, well, doesn't that make me more obligated to point out how corrupt and insane this is? Somebody has to say something. And God bless Mike Cernovich. I'm glad he did say something. And God bless Scott Greer and Matt Walsh and everybody else who is finally understanding what happened to everybody at Charlottesville. Thank God for you guys. But you were not there. And I was. And somebody's got to point out what really happened and what is going on here. Now, a lot of people ask me, and I got a lot of flack for this, for not fighting the Sines v. Kessler case, but I was never served with that case. No one ever handed me that lawsuit and said, you have been served. I had no obligation to respond to anything. Never went through discovery. I had nothing to do with that trial. And you, again, check with your own lawyer. This is not legal advice, but none of us have a legal obligation to go out and seek trouble. To go out and say, hey, I'd like to be part of that lawsuit, please. You don't have that legal obligation. If somebody wants to sue you, they need to serve you. And I was never served. So I had nothing to do with that case. I never talked about it because it was always this, I'm a named defendant on the paperwork, and I didn't want to affect the case negatively. But in this case, where I am not a defendant at all, no gray area, I believe it is my obligation to point out that this is a political prosecution. This is corrupt in its essence. This prosecutor is an embarrassment to the legal profession, and any judge who lets this slide, he needs to be removed from the bench. So I will not just stand by and not say anything about this case. This is the hill. This is where somebody's got to take a stand and point out what is happening. Not just in Charlottesville, but in the entire country right now. Somebody's got to say it. So Again, I have no political views. You guys all beat it out of me, taking my kids and starving me in isolation, literally torturing me for months. I have no political views whatsoever. All I care about is the legal profession and the law. And that's all we're talking about on this program today. This is illegal. What is happening in this case, it is illegal. What has happened in cases all across the country for the past several years. Seamus, checking in from Palm Beach County. Hey, how'd you get there? Message me in private, man. I had no idea. Hail Invictus, stay tough, brother. Stay on that cold shower, Estilo. For real. If you missed previous episodes of this program, you should be taking cold showers. Boosts testosterone, also makes you more of a man, hardens the will. Freedom Falcon, hey man, long time no see. How does one find out if one has a warrant, local or federal? Don't have much experience with that kind of thing. Good question, Freedom Falcon. Here in Florida, you would go to the internet and you would type in FDLE for Florida Department of Law Enforcement warrant search. Type in your name. If it says no warrants, typically that means you don't have a warrant. Now, I don't know what state you're in. Don't tell me what state you're in. But your state probably has something along the same lines where there's a statewide warrant search and you just type your name in. However, in a case like this, or in a case like mine several years ago, if it's a high-profile case or if it's a political reign of terror, as in these Charlottesville cases, they're going to issue secret warrants. So going to the FDLE is not going to bring it up. Going to your local sheriff and typing it in there, it's not going to bring it up. And that's because they don't want you running. And they don't want you to be able to turn yourself in. They want to do maximum damage. They want to ambush you when you least expect it. They want to hold you without bond for as long as possible. They want to triple chain you and extradite you and make your life a living hell. So you're not going to find out. Sorry to tell you, Freedom Falcon. Unless you have a friend in law enforcement who can run the warrant for you, but that might be questionable. So I don't know. I don't know what state you're in. Don't tell me what state you're in. But ask somebody closer to you than me. Geographically, that is. Because I can't look for it for you, man. I don't have that kind of access. I have other lawyers. So maybe I'd say get a lawyer where you are and ask them for help with that sort of thing. John Gordon, meet again. Well, who famously said, you are free to do what the law allows, and we control the laws. Rollo Klevich. There used to be a photo of Hubert Humphrey marching in a torchlight parade, Chicago 1968 on the net. Now it seems to have been scrubbed. Yeah, torchlit rallies are clearly illegal now. Let's see. Hypothetical advice for people who were present at the candlelight procession, asks Ulfi Ulfer. Hypothetically, I'd say contact a lawyer where you are. If you don't know, if you haven't listened to this program before, all lawyers are licensed in their particular state. I happen to be licensed in 4 different states, but anything I say is always based on Florida, because that's where I live, that's where my law firm is. So I am talking about Florida law. I'm not a Virginia attorney. So wherever you are, Virginia or Colorado or whatever, get a lawyer in that state and talk to that person about your rights, because this is just an entertainment program and I can't give you legal advice. Samaria saying get a lawyer, and if anyone you care about was there, get them a lawyer. There's definitely pro bono attorneys in Virginia. Yes, there are pro bono attorneys everywhere. However, not all pro bono attorneys are created equal. And not all private attorneys are created equal. And as we've seen over and over and over and over again, really it comes down to not even their technical prowess in the practice of law, but oftentimes their ideological affinity, or their just bleeding heart for the Constitution. Like, we've had a lot of people who are ideologically hostile to people accused of being white supremacists, but they genuinely believed in the Constitution so much that they really did a good job for their clients. By and large, you will get, whether they're pro bono attorneys or private attorneys, they will throw you under the bus if they think you are a white supremacist, because they don't want to have to explain to their friends why they helped you and why they got you off the hook. Because then they might have to explain to their friends, well, even Nazis deserve a fair defense. God forbid they say that. And the real crime, the cardinal sin for all attorneys, is daring to say, not only were these people innocent, but they were actually good people. Like, why were they being targeted at all? That is what will get you blacklisted. So Buckley Grace asked me, I meant to tell you this on Twitter before coming on the program. I was going to answer your question here because I hate writing on the internet. I just can't do it, man. He said, penny for your thoughts, sir. Do lawyers that take our cases really suffer career-ending blows for doing so? Or is the risk dissidents assume they take exaggerated? It seems like, say, Ricky Vaughn's or Kessler's lawyers aren't hurt by taking their cases. Again, I think that the dividing line is, did you cross the line into saying that these are not just innocent, or not just they have rights, but they're good people, or they're ideologically right? Right? So I don't know who Ricky Vaughn's lawyer is. I honestly just didn't follow that case. But I'd imagine he didn't say, Ricky Vaughn's a good guy, everything he says is right, I'm voting for him in the next election, right? I sincerely doubt he said that. So that's one thing to consider. The other thing to consider is the neighborhood. So Charlottesville is a much different place than, I don't know, Ocala, Florida, right? Ocala is a much different place than Orlando, Florida. Like here, I am notoriously blacklisted from the Orange County Bar Association because of hit pieces by the Southern Poverty Law Center. I'm not allowed to join the Orange County Bar Association here in my own town where I grew up and went to high school and my kids were born. I'm not allowed to be in the Lawyers Club here. Contrast that with basically anywhere else where I am allowed to join whatever I want. So Orlando's a very, it's a gay place. Like, that's just, factually speaking, it's a gay place. Like, everybody knows it. They've got flags all over the place. Like, you can't compare Orlando with Ocala, right? So the neighborhood matters. Their public statements about their clients matter. There are a lot of factors, Buckley. However, I think in most places, the smart thing to do is for these attorneys not to take those cases because they can suffer career-ending blows. And even if they don't, they will suffer tarnishment in their legal community for taking these cases. Back when the American Front case happened, which is how I got into all of this, I got dragged into this whole scene with the American Front case. Those guys were obviously, explicitly set up by the FBI. 100% innocent. When it went to trial, even the guy that set them up said, no, they were not targeting homosexuals. No, they were not targeting other races. No, they were not doing this thing, that thing, making rice and chemical weapons. No, none of it. Not a single allegation was substantiated by their star witness. And yet, because I was on that case and I had applied, I was going to work, doing work at a bigger firm, trying not to out anybody here. I was going to work at a bigger firm doing contracts and business law, which I do, and I love to do. I was told, you cannot work here until you drop the American Front case. And the rest is history, because I never dropped the case. So I never did work at the bigger firm, and I've been on the blacklist ever since. So, hope that answers your question, Buckley Grace. Let's get back to the chat here. I have alibis for Charlottesville, says Seamus. Alibis for Charlottesville and January 6th, but I know it's not enough. Eventually they'll come for me too. Yeah, right. It doesn't really matter if you were there or not, right? All they need is the accusation that you were there. Ulfer is asking, do you believe there will be more sealed indictments? Looking through articles in the Albemarle court page, it looks like there are 3 so far. Yes. So the prosecutor said there were several, and this is out of the Fed's playbook, right? What's this? I forget his name. Isn't that interesting? The federal prosecutor who took over the Western District of Charlottesville and then prosecuted the Rise Above movement cases and James Field. He did that all to, get his name all the newspapers and make a name for himself and probably run for public office and the whole 9 yards. And I cannot remember his name to save my life right now. But anyway, it was his playbook to say, well, we're not going to say how many people it is. We're not going to tell you where they are. So you better be sleeping with one eye open because we're on our way to get all of you. It could be anybody, anytime. To literally put you all in a state of terror. So this prosecutor has taken that page and is running with it. Said there are several indictments. We're not going to tell you how many it is. Nobody knows who it is or where they are, except for apparently Molly Conger. So yes, I do believe there will be more indictments. They're also saying, again, federal playbook, they're saying that this is an ongoing investigation. There will be more prosecutions. That's exactly I cannot remember his name. It's exactly what he said. And it turned out there were no more, but if the whole thing was to put the entire right wing in a state of terror and keep everybody's heads down and keep them underground and keep them looking around nervously every time they walk to their car, then that was achieved. All right, Samaria, God bless you. I'll keep you in my thoughts and prayers. Thank you for being the voice of reason. Thank you, Samaria. Brian, and God bless you as well, Samaria. Brian, good afternoon from the East. Dude, please just text me. I forget to call. Every time we're on this program, I say I'm going to call you, and I forget. Please text me. I will call you right now, because we are ending this show. So weird Spencer was not arrested, says Aloha. Yeah, so one of the things that you'll see when you go to Twitter and you type in Charlottesville and you look at all these articles and you look at all of it's on fire about Charlottesville. Everybody's talking about it. One of the recurring sentiments you will see is, let's look to see who's not arrested. That's going to tell you everything, right? And a lot of people are pointing the finger at Cantwell, and a lot of people are pointing the finger at Spencer. But why? Like, who are they arresting? We don't know. We have no idea. Why are these particular people being arrested? I mean, I've seen it the other side. Like, the only reason they're arresting persons X, Y, and Z is because they're minor figures. They are not, e-celebs or whatever, podcasters, whoever you would think would be the usual suspects. Like, they're not the headline speakers. They're normal people whose lives have already been destroyed, who they can make an easy case against. Like the first guy who was arrested already had a fugitive warrant for something like malicious use of mace, something, I forget the name of the charge, but they're saying that they're going for private citizens who already, their lives have been ruined. What is the point of this, right? And you'd think if they're going to make a political showcase, they'd go for the headliners, the organizers, the big names, right? So who knows what the thought process is? But I would caution that we all refrain from pointing the finger, whether it's at Cantwell or Spencer or Mosley or whoever our least favorite person is, that we all refrain from pointing the fingers, because that's the entire point, isn't it? Is to get people pointing fingers and saying, this is your fault, you're the snitch, you're the one working with these people, which, I mean, hey, may be true. There may be informants. Who knows? Who knows who it is? But if you let that spirit of fear take over and become rabid, it's not going to do anybody any good. That's exactly what they are trying to do, is terrorize you. All of us. Miss K, good to see you. You're on our white list. Thank you, Tony, I think. Speaking of Rams, says Freedom Falcon, and I reckon this will be our last comment because we are out of time. Speaking of Rise Above movement, did you hear about Rundo's international extradition back to the States for the same obscure charge he and others were acquitted of? Yes, I did. Can't talk about it, but yes, I heard about it. And, maybe we'll get back to that publicly later. Can't publicly talk about it presently, but what a just exactly, right? Trump indictment, Rise Above movement case, this Charlottesville prosecution, J6, now they're retrying the Ram case in Los Angeles. Yeah, exact. Just that fits the picture, doesn't it? So, if there are no other questions or comments, we are over time. I believe that's all the articles. Let me look through the our answered Buckley's question. Let me look back to the feed here. Daily Progress. I'm not reading that. Yeah, so Z-Blog here, the real Z-Blog. Reportedly, the Soros-appointed DA in Virginia is charging people who marched in the Charlottesville Tiki Torch thing with a felony. The claim is they intimidated people with fire. The thing to watch is who does not get charged. So again, who knows the reasoning behind who they're charging and not charging. So let's all calm down. They want you to be in a state of fear, so let's not give them everything they want. With that being said, thank you all for listening. Should I tell my friend, last question, should I tell my friend Asulfur, who I think was present, to consider visiting family outside the country for the foreseeable future? I would not advise that. Again, I would advise you telling your friend to talk to a lawyer, like ASAP, if you are worried about them. You could also contact me by email, not by social media, because you do not have any reasonable expectation of privacy on social media. Don't write anything confidential on social media. Write me by email where attorney-client privilege will attach. So, all that being said, thank you all for listening. Sad news today, but stay cool out there, and we'll see you next week, everybody.